So it is my pleasure. We're actually going to start just a few minutes early because Heidi is ready to go and she has a lot of information to cover with us today on setting it up, when to use set versus parameter actions. Now, Heidi really found a love for data visualization and has really just taken off since 2017. She has trained over 300 people. She works at the Information Lab Deutschland. And I think the only thing, a little birdie has told me this, the only thing that Heidi loves more than data visualization, maybe alpacas. So there's your fun fact on a Friday. So let's give a warm welcome to Heidi Kalb, setting it up, when to use set versus parameter actions.
Hi, everybody, and good morning to you in the US, because it's already afternoon here in Germany. So I'm very happy to start a little early and happy to start you guys on this day. So I'll just share my screen. And I hope you are all seeing now the Set It Up start slide. So thanks for the introduction, Emily. As Emily already said, I have a lot to cover, so we will probably not have time for questions, and I will not have time to show everything in detail, but please do come up afterwards and bombard me with questions. I'm happy to answer any and all that I can to the best of my abilities. So does it sometimes happen to you that you see a tweet or a LinkedIn post where one of the Tableau Jedis of a community shows how to do something you never thought was possible in Tableau, and it completely blows your mind? Because it happens to me all the time. In fact, it has happened to me more and more frequently in the last year. Tableau keeps rapidly publishing new features. Some of the biggest recent game changers amongst them were set actions and parameter actions. We've seen people accomplish amazing things with those two features, and I will mention which blogs to check out later on. But for my TFF talk, I want to get down to the basics. What did we have before set and parameter actions came into play? What are sets and parameters? How do these actions change the way we viz? What is it either of them can or cannot do? And in which cases should we use one over the other? And since Fee Gordon absolutely smashed her Tableau quiz at TFF APAC a few months ago, there will be a tiny little quiz at the end of my session as well. So please whip out your phones or laptops, go to menti.com and use the code 658602. And yes, there will be a tiny reward for the one who gets the highest points. But let's dive right in. What kind of interactivity in the form of actions did we use before Tableau gifted us with set and parameter actions? Well, of course, there were filter actions, and they were great. They still are great. They help us limit which kind of data is being shown. But sometimes users have difficulty understanding what is currently being filtered. And interaction between quick filters and action filters can be messy, even if you synchronize them. Filtering across multiple dashboards using filter actions could bring out bugs at times. Users were unable to use filter actions to exclude the selected values rather than include them. And depending on your use case, you would need multiple actions per dashboard. We also had and have highlight actions. Those will help us visually bring to the forefront certain selected values. But those highlights would be gone the moment the users deselected the previously selected marks. Highlighting across dashboards, again, can be messy. And if you're not careful and we're trying to highlight certain fields in a sheet that doesn't contain those fields, everything will be grayed out. So let's take a look at what we can do at the moment. Sets help us with these issues. But what are sets? I like to describe sets in my trainings as kind of an exclusive nightclub. You're either in or you're out. There's really only those two options that we have. Set actions drive the way we see things, and we can use them to visually show things that we weren't able to show before. So let's use them. Let's see how we use them. We use them for many purposes. Often we use them for easier filtering, as you only have to drag and drop them into the filter card, and Tableau will automatically keep only your in values. But you can also drop your set onto color, size, or shape in the marks card in order to change the way your marks are being displayed. And of course, you can create calculations around your sets. One you will probably find yourself returning to time and again will be structured something like this. If set, then measure, end. Since the set is technically a Boolean field, nothing more is needed in your condition. You will use this to filter implicitly rather than explicitly when you still want to see other values in your sheet, but also limit one measure to only the values contained in your set. Now, let's take a look at an example. We have here the CO2 emissions of 250 countries from 1960 to 2014. And I want to highlight a few selected countries in order to see how their development over the past 50 years compares to their 2014 emissions and vice versa. So I just select a couple of bars. I've already implemented my highlight action, and we can see those lines being highlighted. Or it might be easier the other way around. I select a couple of lines over here, and the bars will be highlighted as well. Now, the moment I deselect, everything goes back, or I just click anywhere else, which might happen by accident. But I also want to apply this to a second dashboard. So again, I've already applied this action, and this is perfectly highlighted. But if I want to deselect here, I can't do that because this set doesn't originate a highlight action. I can try to highlight and then, or to select and then again deselect, but still the highlight action is saved. So let's maybe try this another way. I have created a set for my countries called country set. I just added any kind of country in there and put it for the moment onto detail, but I actually want to have my country set on color. And we will see that those values that are in the set now have a different color. If I want to make those lines slightly bigger, I can also put the set to size, and then those will again be a little thicker than the rest of the lines. I do the same thing for my other dashboard, for my other sheet, excuse me, put the country set onto color, and we will color the bars that are in the set. And I've already implemented my dashboard action. Just let me remove the other two. And let's take a look at this one. From every kind of sheet that I have in this dashboard, I want to change the set. And I don't have to select which field to use here or where to apply the action because it always applies to one set. I just have to choose the data source and then choose one of the sets that I have in here, and it will change automatically for every sheet where I use this set. So I don't have to worry about the scope. It will always apply to all the sheets where I have this set. In my case, I want to keep the set values when I deselect because that's what I don't have with highlight actions. So hit OK again. And if I select Qatar here, we can see that Qatar gets colored in the other sheet. Or if I select a couple of bars over here in the bar chart, then the according lines will be colored. And even if I deselect, you can see it's still colored. If I want to use the same thing in my other sheet, then I just go to the sheets, again, put my country set onto color, and that will change. And also in my donut chart. Please don't ever use 250 values in your pie or donut chart. So in my case, I just want to put this to color again, and then I don't need to use my country names anymore. So I just drag them out and it all gets aggregated. And you can see I have some space for a field over here, and I want to use that. So I have two sheets, two calculations. One to calculate which part of the emissions comes from the countries that are in my set, which is just if country set, then emission end. So that just gives me the emission for my selected countries. And I have another sheet to calculate what kind of percentage is that. Well, I just take those emissions of the selected countries that I just showed you and divide that by the sum of total emissions. And if I now select to show my mark labels, I can see the percentage of the emissions from my set. And again, if I select a couple of bars over here, we will see that this changes in the line chart, in the bar chart, and of course in my donut chart as well, in my bubble chart, and my band also changes. So that's a big thing that we didn't have before. I don't have to choose which sheets it applies to because it's automatically in the set. I can also use the set to sort my values. So let's say I select some countries that are pretty far down in my bar chart, then I would have to scroll all the way to find which are affected. And I can simply put my set, for example, to rows so that those always get put to the very top. I don't want to show the header. And then those values always show up at the top, no matter which ones I choose. So let's just choose a few other ones. And you will see those automatically get sorted to the top. Now that we saw a little example of what set actions can do, let's take a more clearer look at that. So we find that we can use set actions to filter. I didn't show you that explicitly, but that's an ability we have. We can also use them to filter by excluding the values we select. We can, of course, use set actions to change the color, size, or shape of our marks, to change the scope of our calculated fields, and they will react to single and to multi-select. There's a few things that set actions cannot do. And that is, they will not react to measures. They are currently not able to use multiple fields. And of course, since a set always sticks to one field, they can't span multiple data sources. But that is where parameters come into play. Parameters, well, Tableau defines parameters as dynamic values that replace constant values in calculations, filters, and reference lines. Personally, I like to describe parameters as values floating around in space. They are completely removed from any kind of data source until you reach from your data source to the parameter and use it in some kind of way. A parameter by itself isn't worth a lot, unless, of course, you use it in text fields such as my reminder at the bottom to join the quiz. But you always need to reference it in a filter, calculation, or reference line somewhere. Parameters can do a bunch of things that are difficult to accomplish with sets, or even impossible. For example, you can filter or calculate relative to a parameter. You can, for example, filter on a 6-month span around a date set in a parameter, or color everything that contains a string value in a parameter. You can also use the same parameter in combination with any field in any data source, so you can use them across databases. Since parameters by themselves are completely removed from your data, you can reference them anywhere in your data. And of course, you can use them to set reference lines. Now, again, let's take a look at an example. I have 3 different sheets here that come from 3 different data sources. So we have our Superstore to the left, we have Kickstarter and CO2 emissions on the right. And I want to be able to set a focus year to focus my sales in the Superstore. And I want to see the Kickstarter pledges in that year, the CO2 emissions in that year, and also want to highlight the previous period. And for that, I created a parameter. So I go to my sheet just to show you the parameter I created. It's a selected year. And this is simply an integer value. At the moment, it has some value so that you can't see anything, but I allow all kinds of values because I will drive it from my data, and I assume that I actually have valid data that contains years. And then, as it's only floating around in space, I have to use it somewhere. So I have a little calculated field in here where I say I want to have my selected year, and I see how many years are between the selected year and the year of my Kickstarter, or when my Kickstarter project was created. If the difference is 0, then I want this to be my selected period. If it's 1, then that's my previous period, and I just want to bunch all the other years together in a string called other. And I have the same thing for my CO2 emissions. So again, I have my parameter action year, which is basically the same thing, but in a different data source, because that's how it works. You can see it's a different field here, but again, the rest of the calculation is pretty much the same. And since I want to drive the color in my Superstore sales as well, I have fields here as well, but I wanted to do something a little special. I didn't just want to color the year, I wanted to have a color scale. I wanted it to be grayscale if it wasn't my focus year, but I wanted it to be a colored scale if it was. So I created 2 fields in here. So I have one that gives back my sales if my order date is the selected year, and one that gives back my sales if it's not the selected year. And if I now put my measure values onto color, you can see I already have my measure values on columns, and then select to use separate legends. Well, can't see much yet, but if I select any year now, this will be colored. And you can see year 2013 is colored, and it's also colored in the monthly Kickstarter pledges per year. And we also have the previous period colored, which is 2012. And that is because I have 3 parameter actions in here. So I can click anywhere on the CO2 emissions, and it will drive my selected year parameter by the field year of CO2 emissions. And in this case, I don't want to aggregate because I have single years only. So if I select 2011 now in my CO2 emissions, we can see that it changes in all the 3 sheets. And if I select, say, 2012 in the Kickstarter pledges, again, it changes for all the other sheets. So that's how I can simply drive my parameters. But let's look at a different example. Let's say I have a huge number of clients, and I want to see all the clients that start maybe with a C because I'm interested in Christopher, and maybe I have some superstition that all clients starting with a C, I don't know, bring in higher sales or anything. So I have created, again, a parameter, which is just a string parameter, again, allowing for all values. And in this parameter, I want to select, or I want to collect the first letters, so the initials of my clients. For that, I have a calculated field, which just gives back the first letter. And I want to see if that first letter comes up in my parameter. And if yes, then I want to have that first letter. And if not, I just want to group them together under the field other. And I have a second data source, which is just this little helper sheet, which is just a tiny little keyboard data source. And again, I have my selected characters in here. And if my parameter contains a certain character, then I want to be gifted this character, and else I want everything to be under other. Put this selected characters to color, and let's see what happens now. So if I now said I'm interested in all the clients starting with a C, I simply press C, and they are all colored, everybody that starts with a C. Or if I want everybody who starts with a T, I can do that. And because I drove my parameter action this way, I can even select multiple. Because I said if I click in the keyboard, I want this parameter to be driven by the capitals, and I want to be able to concatenate. So I want all the values that I select to land in my parameter. So if I select ASDF, just give me a moment, then they will all be colored. We can see it gets super beautiful, and I have all these values in here. So that's how I can drive my parameter to take several values. Now, let's summarize how parameter actions can make our lives a little easier. They can take values from any field in any data source, thus spanning any and all data sources you might use in a workbook. They will aggregate the values you feed into them if you select multiple, and that's a big thing. Or you can use them to color your marks, set labels, or set reference lines. On the other hand, they cannot really take more than one value because they can always only be assigned one, but it's kind of a moot point since we can now concatenate strings, so that's kind of like taking multiple values. But the main question now is, how can you decide whether to use a set action or a parameter action? How will you know when to use one over the other? And I suggest you pay attention now, because this is what we will talk about in the little quiz in just a minute. So, depending on the number of data sources that you want to use, if you only have one, you can use either set actions or parameter actions. But as soon as you use multiple, you will always have to use a parameter actions because sets stick to one data source. And the same applies to the number of fields that you want to use in your set action or parameter action. If you only have one field, either action is fine. But as soon as you have multiple, you will have to use parameter actions because sets stick to only one field. Now, how about the values? If you have discrete values, you'll be fine again with either set actions or parameter actions. But as soon as you have continuous values, parameter actions will serve you better. Selection. Now this is kind of a big thing. So if you select only single values, only single marks, then again, either action will be fine for you. And both actions do react to multi-selection, but there's a difference in how they react to this. So set actions will simply add all the attributes, all the values you select, they will be added to the set. But parameter actions, since parameters can technically only take one value, they will first aggregate all the values that you select by taking the sum or the average or the minimum or the maximum, or as you just saw with strings, by concatenating them. And then they will assign that aggregate to the parameter. If you choose to aggregate, so if you choose to have none as your aggregation, then they will not react to multi-value selection. So that's also important to note. In terms of styling, both actions can assign colors or size or even shape. If you want to color or size discretely, so only make distinct differences, then set actions might be a little easier to use because you don't necessarily need a calculated field, which you always need with parameter actions. But as soon as you care about the deviation of something where you definitely have to calculate, either one is fine. And last thing, filtering. Yes, you can use both to filter, but your set actions will help you filter multiple values if you want to include or exclude multiple, whereas parameter actions will help you filter relative to a value. Now, I hope everybody is happy to start the quiz. And there we go. And let's just start and be fast to get more points. The first question, which of these actions can you use across multiple data sources? Is it set actions or parameter actions, or both, or neither? And let's actually take a look at the chat. Oh no, well, people are voting. Perfect. So 2 people got this correct. It's the parameter action where you can use multiple data sources. Next one. If you have only one discrete field of origin, you can use this one. Is it set actions or parameter actions, or is it both, or is it neither? Only one discrete field of origin. And it's both. Perfect. Yes, set actions is correct, but you can also do this for parameter actions. So you're not technically wrong, just not fully correct. Now you don't need a calculated field using this to shape your marks. Is it set actions or parameter actions, or both, or neither? Let's take a look. and it's set actions. All right, so let's take a look how the leaderboard is currently. Don't worry, we have 2 more questions, but let's see who's in the lead. And Ryan, wow. Ryan going to the forefront and Matthew and Croc following up really close. So 2 more questions, they have a slightly different structure now. Can you use multi-selection for parameter actions? Ooh. Yes, and Tableau will always aggregate or concatenate. Yes, but only for numerical values. Yes, but only if you choose to, or no. Which one is it? Yeah, that one was a little tricky. So Tableau will not always aggregate or concatenate if you don't choose to. So you have to choose. Again, not technically wrong, just not fully correct. And our last question to get points with, which action is best for filtering purposes? Is it set actions because you can filter multiple values? Or parameter actions because you can filter relatively? Or filter actions are always best? Or is it either? Yeah, and again, depending on your use case, it will be either. So one more question that will not give you any points, but I just want to know, are you ready to set it up? What are you itching to try out first? What are you really aiming to get your hands on? Just type in a few answers. Give you a few more seconds. Oh, rewatch this. Yeah, it was a little quick. Parameters. Gotta love parameters. Ooh. Okay. Both, yeah. Already using. Okay, that's good. So, perfect. Thank you very much. Let's take a look at the final score. And is Ryan still in the lead? Oh no. Ooh, magical rhino coming up. No, it's Matthew. Whoa, Matthew, congratulations, you won. And as I promised, there will be a tiny little prize. So those of you who follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you might be aware that I do post ukulele videos from time to time. So Matthew, please get in touch with me after this and we'll figure out which song I will address personally to you, and you will be gifted a little song on the ukulele from me. So let's just go over the last slides. I promised you a few more resources. What did we have before? That's what we talked about. We talked about what are sets, what are parameters, how can we use those actions to change the way we viz, what can and can they not do, and how can we use one over the other. And if you want to learn more, because I know this was just a very shallow look at them, please check out Bethany Lyons, Lindsay Poulter, Mark Reed, Rosario Gorner, Ryan Genzel, if you want to know more about set actions. And for parameter actions, I can definitely recommend Jonathan Drummey, Joshua Milligan, Ken Flerlich, Kevin Flerlich, and again, Lindsay Poulter. So I will probably post these on Twitter later. Don't need to memorize them all, but please do check them out because they are absolutely brilliant. And if you have any more questions, please get in touch with me. Thank you so much for participating. Feel free to reach out via Twitter, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Matthew, please get in touch. And feel free to follow me on Tableau Public and find out if I might at some point be one of the cool kids. And maybe I will do incredible stuff with set and or parameter actions one day. Thank you very much.